Commutifi presents Between the Lines with Andy Keaton. Each week, we explore the challenging issues transportation demand management professionals face on their journey to transition commuters from driving alone to more sustainable, shared, and active commuting habits. Be sure to subscribe to hear next week's episode and check out our exclusive commuter playlists on Spotify. This is Between the Lines with Andy Keaton.
Hi, everyone, and welcome aboard to the Between the Lines podcast. Today, we're speaking with Michelle Ciddio. Michelle is the head of partnerships at Liftango, which is a shared mobility platform and a great Commutifi platform, a great Commutifi partner. We're really happy to have Michelle on today. Michelle has 15 plus years of experience in various organizations across the retail, technology, and IT software spaces. Where she has successfully implemented strategy and process refinement and maximization to transform the end user experience, both internally and externally. I think we're going to talk a little bit about some of her past positions as well and things that she's done before joining Liftango. But before we get started, thanks for being on today.
Thanks for having me, Andy. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. And I'm excited about this particular episode because we're talking about something that is pretty broad but also pretty specific. Oxymoron there. We're talking today about why demand responsive transit, or sometimes called DRT, will help save the planet. So to start off, it might be good to just, so our listeners and our viewers can have an understanding of what that is. Can you tell us a little bit more about what demand responsive transit is?
Yeah. So, demand responsive transit, simply put, is a mode of transportation that allows passengers to be picked up at a location and time that's most convenient to them. So there is that level of, variability baked into it. Our role is to provide transit agencies, fleet operators, companies, and passengers with a single technology platform that makes DRT reliable, easy to operate, and convenient. So it's really about just finding simplified modes of transportation that are convenient and also variable in time and in location and duration.
Sure. So it's kind of like, instead of the traditional bus model that runs the same time every day, it's maybe more like an Uber or Lyft, some sort of hybrid between the two.
Yeah, and it's kind of a mix of, somewhere in the middle of that, in that it is like flexible and invariable, but you can also sort of bake in maybe some common or frequent touch points as well.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really great is it's kind of like activity or intention based, rather than it being, just on a loop consistently going, where you might have it, completely full, half full, completely empty. So it really tailors it on both, I think, the technical driving side of it, but then also on the rider side of it as well.
Cool. Okay. So we're going to get into the rider side in a bit, but I think it's interesting to think about it from the kind of this big system efficiency perspective. Yeah. So how does DRT help optimize kind of the efficiency of the whole transportation system?
Yeah, so DRT calculates the most efficient way to pick up and drop off multiple passengers at any given time of the day, so that variability that we were just speaking about. A good service will complement the existing public transit networks and provide transit services where there are none. By encouraging its use and ensuring DRT is reliable, easy to operate, and convenient, we can move more people in fewer vehicles. So again, it's that convenience on the rider side of it, but it also allows systems to be put in place to support, let's say, areas that would be maybe more rural or less serviced, and still provide that connectivity real time.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think this is interesting. It's a really interesting solution, and I would venture to guess that it has some optimization potential for many different types of organizations. Yes. Can you talk a little bit to me about who can benefit from kind of this optimization, whether it's maybe employers or cities or transit agencies?
Yeah, it's all of the above, absolutely. So not only is it like the single or individual user, right? But if you look at it from like an organizational structure perspective, you have individual companies and organizations. You may have corporate parks, right? Where you have multiple businesses leasing space or property from. So if you look at like downtown Toronto, some of these buildings that have, 40, 50 different businesses in one singular building with lack of parking, they can benefit from it. We're seeing a lot of like university college campuses also leveraging this. You'll see, states, regions, provinces, if you're in Canada, cities also benefiting from this. And then you'll also see sort of areas where you might have like let's say a central city, but you'll have like a lot of smaller suburban or more rural areas
Sure.
close enough to the city, but not too close, where they can leverage or benefit from the transit model that's already in place. So a lot of it, I think, stems from that. And then there's also just the opportunity, I think, to connect to already existing, infrastructures, right? So this sort of becomes a supporting mechanism or an enabler to then connect you to, let's say, that general transit route. So it's much more convenient, I think, in connecting to existing sort of transit ecosystems as well.
Sure. So it's kind of like getting at, and maybe you could call it like a hub and spoke model or something, where you
Yeah.
have like the standard, train route or bus route or something that's always full during peak commute times. But then we
Yeah.
have all these people around it that
Yeah.
we don't need a empty bus with like one or two people on it, sending them in. We can kind of just move them to these hubs
Yeah.
occasionally. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you'll see a reduction of vehicles, right, needing to park as well.
Oh, sure.
You'll see a reduction in, single driving vehicles. If I look at sort of like the IKEA model and what we looked at, it was sort of to foster, and this is pre-COVID and now coming out of COVID, organic opportunities to meet people that maybe you don't interface with day to day, but you live in the same neighborhood or community. So to
Hmm.
sort of foster, the opportunity to meet and connect as well on your ride to and from work with people that maybe you work in a different department, you work in a different building, so you would never really connect or meet. So, less congestion, less polluting emissions as well, which I think is super important. Alleviating stress, right, from a commute. So maybe trying to get some more control in an area where there are a lot of uncontrollable variables or factors. But that's, I think really it as well. And then, I think you touched on it earlier, but the ability to rapidly modify how many people would be allowed in a vehicle if capacity restrictions are mandated, if there's any sort of like contact tracing required. A DRT system actually supports sort of the reality in which we live in today as well, with our sort of ever-changing environment around us.
Yeah, that's a really interesting. I've never really thought about it from that perspective. That makes sense because you kind of know who's on, or you could certainly have 50% capacity if you need, or you can make sure that you have the right number of vehicles for the
Yeah.
right number of people. That's
I think
interesting.
it allows like the operators to have some accountability and ownership, right? To support that if that was ever the case, or the need to notify or report or identify. And then it should, build trust for the riders, right? Because that is actually being accounted for and can be supported. So, I think we're seeing a lot of that nowadays, especially, right? Even in restaurants, you're being asked to leave your name, your phone number,
Hmm.
should there be a case or something happen, with COVID. So to be able to actually implement that in a nice way, to be able to mandate, you know, um, social distancing cues, sanitation requirements, and bake that into a real time system without impacting, again, the variability or the demand of the transit is really a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I think that's really great. That's really interesting. So I want to move on
Yeah.
to the kind of, you mentioned a lot about the user stuff. I want to move on to the user stuff, but before we get to that, just wanted to kind of come touch back on this system efficiency side of things.
Yeah.
So I think what you're saying, or what we're discussing here, is that because you can have an optimized vehicle to rider kind of matchup, you're not having a lot of these. I guess like in the rideshare business, you call them like dead miles. I think
Yeah.
you're not having a lot of these like empty trips going,
Yeah.
um, and, and that's kind of benefit from, I'm guessing, a cost and an emissions perspective. That's kind of like, if we're talking like high level, that's the key that maybe a transit operator should be like pretty
Yeah.
stoked about.
So it's that reduction in operating costs, but it's going to be an increase in efficiency, right, and utilization of the vehicles that are on the road. And then, you'll see that increase in passenger trips, but you'll probably see an organic reduction in the cadence, right, or the volume in which you have multiple vehicles running dead, right, or empty. So it becomes a much more efficient model, which I think becomes just a much more enjoyable experience, both on the rider and the driver side of the house. Because I can't imagine it being fun driving around in like a van or a bus by yourself,
With like one person. Yeah, I once got on
Yeah.
a bus in Boulder, and like I think I must have taken it 20 stops. I was the only person on this big bus. I was like, wow, I'm taking the most inefficient limousine I've ever gotten in.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
that's
no,
what it was.
exactly. And it's not that the prices change, right? So, it's not dynamic pricing in that you pay less if there's more people on versus not, right? It's a fixed fee or a fixed rate is what we see. So yeah, to your point, you had a great limo ride, but probably from the side of the organization or the group that was, operating that, very expensive trip.
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking that the whole time I was on there. I was
Yeah.
like, wow, I really like it. Probably would have been less expensive just to take an Uber from like the systems perspective. But for me, it was great because I needed to get somewhere, and it was like $275 or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think that gets to the next point, which is we often hear a lot about it's like the chicken or the egg kind of issue here in transit, where it's like, do we have more? We don't have enough ridership, but maybe we don't have enough ridership because we don't have enough routes or enough frequency. But this maybe can get at like both of those. We don't need to just have infinite number of buses running all the time. We can kind of plan around that. But I think the question that everyone's going to be asking, and you've touched on it, is what is it like for the rider?
Yep.
Right? Like, what is this rider experience like? So can you just walk me through, if you're a rider who's using a system like this, what does that look like?
Yeah, so for the most part, it's multi-channel in that booking system, right? So of course, like we offer an application, so you can have it on your mobile phone. There's a desktop version, so if you're more traditional and you don't carry a smartphone or you don't have data, let's say, to be enabling it, you can book in advance as well, which is really great. So you can be as planned or as variable as you need. A lot of the services also will offer like a kiosk, and or a call center function as well.
Sure.
So I think depending on your comfort level and maybe your technical capability level, you have sort of optionality in maybe being a little bit more traditional in how you book versus maybe more modern or technical.
Sure.
And what's also great is like the ability to actually book on behalf of others as well, right? So if you have someone visiting you from another city, if you're booking on behalf of like a parent or a grandparent, like there is that optionality and functionality as well. There's also like the special service request functionality, which I think is really great, especially being a mom. So of course, like if I have the stroller and bags, it's going to take me a minute or two extra to get on board. If someone's traveling with a wheelchair or a mobility device, they may need a little bit more time. And so when booking those things and actually saying, hey, I have a stroller with me or I have a wheelchair, that actually gets baked into the time that it will take to actually, onboard that person safely and securely, and then have that bus or vehicle go on to its sort of next stop or next place. So again, that variability supports that comfort and that convenience, but also makes it extremely efficient, both on the end user side, but then also for the team or the operators as well, so that they'll know they have, a mom with two kids coming on board that has a stroller, so they can pull over and park and maybe assist in getting, everything up and ordered and sorted accordingly. So it really just makes it for like a very efficient ride, but it's also very mindful of, I think, the different sort of realities in which people will be needing, requiring, and probably onboarding that bus or that vehicle. And then it bakes it in so that way you're not like delayed or behind. I mean, I don't know how many times if you've ever taken like an Uber pool or like a multi-share with Uber or Lyft, and someone comes out and they run out and they like load stuff in the trunk, like, oh, hold on, I'll be right back. And then they have to go up an elevator or back into a building to get their next load of stuff. And then you're sitting there and you're like, wow, this saved me $5 or $6, but now I'm going to be 30 minutes late because, the time sort of stacks up and adds up, and it's not something that you could forecast, right? Whereas in this model, that forecasting, again, as long as you have the information through the booking process, is actually accounted for.
I think that, first of all, it sounds awesome. And I think one of the things that you touched on, which is maybe the most important or most interesting piece, is the equity piece of it. Because I would guess, I think people probably are thinking, how equitable is it? You need an app, but knowing that there's ways you could do it via calling or actually going in and booking it yourself at a kiosk is great. So there shouldn't be an issue there with actually getting the vehicle booked. But then it actually gets to people with disabilities are able to better use the system. We're making sure the right vehicles are there for them. People with children or people, elderly people who need more assistance, all of these folks have more opportunity to use the public transit system. I think that's a really cool benefit.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is that it's going to give the operators insights into those behavioral patterns, right? So you may find a specific route, a specific, maybe day or time where you might see, 4 or 5 wheelchair requests going from, I don't know, a senior citizen living home to maybe like a coffee shop or something, right? Mm. So then as an operator, you could say, hey, you know what, maybe we need to equip this particular time slot or this particular journey with, a disability enabled vehicle, because we're picking up multiple individuals, right, at this specific time, going to this specific place. So you start to see sort of patterns and trends. So I think just having, when you're starting off, that baseline, or even like a hypothesis as to which you think the patterns and trends and behaviors will be, is a great starting point. But the system is super agile. So you can sort of tweak and adjust as the sort of reality or the data starts to sort of prove what is actually needed and wanted versus what you think when you first start, right? So we always see that transitional journey, I guess, with operators, where they have an idea or a thought. It could be from past life experience. It could be from, I don't know, like survey sentiment, where they start, but it's always like a kind of a starting point, a diving off point. And then you see these sort of like organic adjustments happening real time, which is really lovely. And then you actually see something crafted that works well.
Yeah.
And again, is agile, so can continue to flex as needed.
And I think that's something at Commutifi here we talk about a lot, which is, make sure your programs are data driven, start with a baseline, but then shift from that based on what you see. And it sounds to me like DRT, demand responsive transit, is a really good option for maybe everyone to take that data and then actually continually improve their systems. And from everything comes back to transportation demand management, or TDM. I think this of all the solutions that we talk about, this seems to be the most flexible, which is kind of one of the big benefits of in TDM, is thinking about how can we get people out of cars in a efficient and flexible way. I really like this idea. I wonder from you,
Yep.
If you have any good examples of this being used, because it's good to talk, high level, but it'd be great to hear how this is actually working in the field, what's going on.
Yeah, so I mean, from a Liftango standpoint, we have 2 DRT projects right now, one based in the UK called Just Go, and one in the US called BC Go. These are specifically designed to improve the connection between rural communities and local amenities, and to reduce the reliance on single occupancy vehicles. Both are situated, like I said, in rural areas, in geographies where the primary mode of transportation is that single sort of driver, and the availability or connectivity to public transit is just not there. And so what we've actually seen, again, is high intake, right? High demand and high need, but also these sort of organic patterns and trends from these rural communities, right? Going into sort of these local, more urban city center areas for local amenities, appointments, and that kind of a thing. What you're also seeing as well is, I think, from a COVID perspective, right? people liking sort of that, like that, again, we live in a very unknown, uncontrollable environment, the world we live in today. So just being able to sort of have that, that opportunity to sort of control, plan, decide, is also very, like, I think, supportive for people. So we've seen this massive uptake with these two models. I think just talking about past life stuff and what we worked on at IKEA, for example, all IKEA locations, whether it's retail stores or, corporate offices, are always on the outskirts or outside of the city center, right? They're on potato fields. And transportation, both for associates and customers, you need a vehicle essentially to get out there. Like, yes, there are shuttles, but they, run on a very rigid time clock, and you're either, leaving too early or you're having to stay too late at the store. You could have to wait. And so bringing in these models, like a DRT model, just gives people, again, that variability and that real-time access and availability. So what we found, again, is like, employees and customers that are coming from the same area being able to in real time actually, go to that like central location. So to a store, if it's, employees to the corporate office, at a set time. And you'll see those sort of spikes or intakes. So if you're looking at the corporate side of the house, there's some sweet hours in the morning where people are needing to get to work by a certain time. And then there's, some times in the evening. And maybe I'll use the Malmo, Sweden office as an example. That's where I worked. And, there was a large subset of us that had our kids in the same international school. And so it was super strange that I would see them all, because we all have to be at school by a certain time to drop off the kids. So you meet all kind of by the doors or the parking lot. You'd all then get into your independent vehicles.
All right, see you work.
Drive to the office, fight for the last, few parking spots. And then at the end of the day, same thing, right? Like the after school program, which is called Free Teas, ends at a certain time. So you would then be leaving at the same time to get to the school for that same time, and then sort of dispersing from there. So even seeing people picking up from like the school location. So like we could walk to school, for example, from our flat. So being able to drop the kids off and then just pick up a ride to take me from the school to the office and then office back to the school was super convenient. And then I didn't have to worry about like fighting, like the 50 cars for like the last 10 spots. So it made life a little bit easier.
I think that's a great example. That's funny. I bet that happens all the time. It's like, we'll drive to this one location. We'll all drop our kids off, and we could just get in the same. We're going to come back at the same time. We're going to the same spot. But let's just race. So you see the 10 cars racing down the street to the
exactly
headquarters.
When it's all roundabouts too, so people are taking like alternative like side streets, and like you're trying to get super crafty on like beating people there, and then it almost becomes this awkward like, you have to say hi at the school, bye at the school, and then you're fighting for spots at the office.
Cars and you take the alternative ways.
So it becomes like a so it made things a little bit more just like sensical, I guess. And the same thing that we're seeing with like the two use cases from the Liftango side of the house. It's just giving people that optionality. And I think it's connecting individuals in a way that wouldn't be dependent on like a single vehicle or like somebody needing to give a ride, you know what I mean? Like to somebody.
I like it. I think that's good. I like those examples too. It's good to hear that this works particularly well in places where a lot of transit doesn't work, like in these more rural or ex-urban areas. That's an awesome benefit of it, and it's great to hear that it's getting more usage during COVID, which is, I know, been like transit agencies have been scrambling trying to get people on, and this is a better way maybe in these kind of weird situations to do it.
Well, and I think what has happened is, transit is still available, but it's available not at the same capacity that it would be, pre-pandemic. And so you're creating sort of boundaries because like the schedule or the availability, let's say, maybe it was every 10 minutes, it's now every 30 minutes or every 45 minutes. And so even though it's available, it's available in like a reduced capacity because there are, a sanitation requirements, it could be capacity requirements. There's all of these things now that have to be in place. So even though it is available, it could still be adding, time, stress, to your day or to your planning of your day. So we were finding from a corporate standpoint that maybe a 30-minute transit commute pre-pandemic would now take upwards of 2 hours just because of the limitation, let's say, on route or schedule. Or maybe now you're taking more connection. So before it could have been like a bus to a train and then a 10-minute walk. And now it's like a bus to a train to a bus to that 10-minute walk. So you're seeing that consolidation, which again, when you have not as much availability, you need to make those types of decisions. But then it adds time to those people that are leveraging those services.
Sure. Well, another great example here from the TDM space: save time, save emissions, and somehow also save cost. I mean, it's great. Cool. Okay, so we're getting towards the end of our time.
Cool.
Like we always do here at Between the Lines. You've said a lot, so it'd be great to just get a bit of a summary here. So in a couple of sentences, why will demand responsive transit help save the planet?
Okay. Big question.
It is a big question.
So just under 1/3 of all carbon emissions come from vehicles, right? We have to reduce this number. It's not a nice to have, it's a must to have. DRT is a way to show people that there is a more convenient and efficient alternative than driving alone. More shared trips means less CO2 in the atmosphere. And I think that's how DRT will help save the planet.
I like it. That was succinct. That was very well done. I like that answer. So Michelle, stick around. I have one final question. But before we get to this, I just have to give my spiel here to everyone. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. Give us a like. Give us a rating. It really helps. And if you haven't yet, I say this every week, make sure you watch our videos on YouTube. You get to see the magic behind the voices. You get to see for the first time ever Commutifi's nice one-person WeWork office here in Montreal. Had to come here because of construction at my place, but it's really fun to kind of just actually put a face to the names. And then subscribe to our email list as well at betweenthelines.io, and we send some information every week so you don't miss out on who's speaking. You get to learn a little bit more about what we've been talking about. So, Michelle, this is the fun question at the end. For our listeners who stick around this long and know this by now, we have these music playlists that we've put together on Spotify. And we were talking before, Michelle, we were saying, what would be a good song for you to add? And you've got a great addition. So let us know, what is it?
So because I'm not a regular mom, I'm a cool mom. We're going to go with Wow by Post Malone.
I love it. That's so fun. That's cool. You were saying you listen, you bump out to it.
With the kids in the car.
With the kids.
Bad words and all. They just know not to say them at school or to other adults or people. So we keep it in the car, but we have a good time. Yeah,
that's the way to do it. You know, they're going to learn the words anyway. You might as well learn in a Post Malone song.
As long as they learn the etiquette around set words, we're good.
I love it. Cool. Well, Michelle, thanks for being on. Thanks for taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you.
We're excited to see where Liftango goes and where DRT goes as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Andy. It's always a pleasure. Merci beaucoup.
Yes, thank you. I am in Montreal to those listeners, so I'm trying to learn some French. I appreciate that, Michelle. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on this week's episode of Between the Lines with Andy Keaton. Be sure to subscribe to hear next week's episode and check out our exclusive commuter playlists on Spotify.